Now, look, the Bible teaches that faith is a gift, but it's not the gift of stupidity. These popular understandings of faith are seriously inadequate for the purposes of Christianity. In contemporary usage, the word faith has come to collect so many connotations in all manner of contexts that it's quite a confusing concept today. What exactly is faith? I mean, we talk about having faith in a spouse, having faith in qualified doctors, airline pilots, the religious tell us we're saved by faith. Same word, radically different contexts. Well, since the Enlightenment, this word faith has come to mean something less than knowledge. And as a result, it's become sort of commonplace today to see faith as a commitment to a belief in something that you're not entirely sure if it's real or true. I mean, if you knew the reality or truth of something, you wouldn't need faith, right? Well, when you play that logic out, what would strong faith be like? Maybe belief in what you know isn't real or true. Many people have this basic idea or understanding of faith today. One philosopher pejoratively puts it, faith is pretending to know things you don't know, while another well-known scientist out there says that faith is the great cop-out, the great excuse to evade the need to think. Now, look, the Bible teaches that faith is a gift, but it's not the gift of stupidity. These popular understandings of faith are seriously inadequate for the purposes of Christianity. So, what does Christianity mean by this word faith? Well, when you open up a New Testament, there's basically one word which we translate as faith, and it's the Greek word pistis. Like in English, it occurs in different forms. It occurs as a verb, an action, a noun, a thing, and an adjective, a description. Or as I like to put it, faith as an act, a fact, and a pact. Looking at these in turn, here's what we find. The most common way that the New Testament refers to faith is as a verb, pietho, which means to persuade, to trust, to have confidence in something or someone. In this sense, faith involves the act of being persuaded or persuading others about the reality of something you know or believe to be true. For example, we read in John 20:31 that these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So right away here, we see the New Testament idea of faith is frankly the opposite to this popular idea out there of faith being belief without evidence. Faith is not so much a way of knowing what is real or true as it is a response to what is known to be real or true. And as a verb, as a doing word, it's an action of trusting someone or something based upon the reason that you have, the evidence that you have, which in the case of John is the entire gospel when he says these things have been written so that you may believe. So when a Christian says, I have faith, they're saying at least two things. Number one, God really does exist. And number two, because of what we know about God, we can trust him. Another common way that faith is used in the New Testament is as a noun, pistis. And in this sense, it's referred to faithfulness or trust, even the faith, the content of what Christians believe. For example, we read in Jude 3, Paul writes, I felt compelled to write and urge you to contend for the faith that was once for all entrusted to the saints. A faith which Paul says in 1 Timothy 4, some will depart from. So in the form of a noun then, faith captures the multifaceted nature of Christian doctrine, the objective content, the facts that believers hold to be true, as well as the subjective aspect of faith in personal trust and reliability in, say, God's character and promises. So faith is a verb and faith as a noun, an act and a fact. A third way faith is used in the New Testament is as an adjective, pistos, in the sense of describing the faithful, believing, of being trustworthy, dependable, trusting. Now, in this sense, faith is a word describing a kind of relationship, a pact between two or more parties. For example, in 2 Timothy 2, we read, if we are faithless, he, God, remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. So faith here is characteristic in the sense that it can be said of both humans and God and their relationship to one another. And when used specifically in reference to God, it's typically this sense of God's faithfulness that we find stressed throughout the Old Testament at length in places like the Psalms and the later prophets and earlier Pentateuch. For example, Deuteronomy 7, which says, "Know therefore that the Lord your God is God, the faithful God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments." You see, knowledge and faith are not opposed, they're reinforcing one another. So there it is, faith as a verb, a noun, an adjective, an act of believing, a fact of what is believed, and a pact describing the relationship between believer and believed. Now, in all of this, it should be hopefully clear that the mistake many religious critics make when they mock faith as an inadequate way of knowing is simply a diminished, mistaken understanding of what faith actually is, at least in any historical, biblical, theological, even lexicographical sense of the term. Anecdotes are just not going to win this argument here. When Paul writes, "We live by faith, not by sight," he's not making a statement about how believers are to think. He's making a statement about how we are to live, which goes beyond reason as a whole life commitment to something we know and believe to be true. I like to think of it like this. I could have all of the evidence and reasons for why this particular woman might make a great wife. But having those reasons doesn't make her my wife. We have to go beyond and make a commitment based upon what we know of her, based upon what I know of her, and commit myself to her in marriage, which is exactly what I did to the woman in question, namely my wife. Only then, however, can she be called my wife once I've made that commitment, taken that step and put my trust in her. Now, this might invite a whole lot of questions for you, and I suspect it should. Truth invites questions. It's how we discern what's right and wrong. But this is the New Testament idea of faith, and it essentially is an invitation for you to check it out. And with that, let me just say, no person who puts their faith in Jesus says, "Yeah, I used to be able to see, but now I'm blind." No, they say just the opposite, like the man in the Gospels, John 9. "I was blind, but now I see." Nowhere is faith ever described in the Bible as a leap into the dark. To the contrary, it's described as a step into the light. And when you turn the lights on, now all of a sudden you can see everything because it's a response to what is real and true.